Hey, welcome back to my channel. This is Lentisa with Nani, guys. Today I bring you a detailed tutorial on how to make a basic bodice. Yes, you had me right, a basic bodice. Okay, so all styles, simple and complex, they all originate from the basic bodice. So you need to know how to draft a basic bodice for you to adapt it into any type of outfit that you want. So I'll be using my pattern paper, my curve rulers, and some markers. This curve ruler, this last one, this short one, has stayed with me for a very long time. Like, that's my favorite. All right, so we'll start with making the front pattern. Now, for you to make a basic bodice, you need your accurate body measurement. So I'll also make a tutorial on how to take your body measurements accurately, because for you to get a basic bodice, you need your accurate measurements. For you to get a basic bodice that fits, you need accurate body measurements. Right, so for a basic bodice, you need the shoulder measurement, the bust measurement, the waist measurement, the hip measurement, the blouse length, the half length. Right, so the hip measurement you're going to take is at the length of the blouse, right? So wherever you want the length of the blouse to be, that you take the circumference around that area, and it would serve as your hip measurement. Note that this particular measurement is different from the hip measurement we use when making gowns or skirts. I also make tutorials on how to make a basic skirt and a basic dress or a basic gown. So I'm using shoulder 14, bust 36, waist 29, hip 36, blouse length 24, and half length of 16. Right, so for your shoulder, you're going to divide that by 2. Then the rest of the horizontal measurements, you're going to be dividing them by 4. So it means my bust, my waist, and my hip, I'll divide them by 4. Right, so the only measurement I'm dividing by 2 is the shoulder measurement. I'm just trying to make a caricature of a basic body, so it looks like I really don't know what I just drew here, but this is an illustration. The neckline has to blend properly. Yes, so this is an illustration of what a basic bodice looks like. This would be your chest line, and this would be your half length, and this would be the length of your blouse. So to make a basic bodice, these are just the measurements that you need. So right now I'll start taking the vertical measurements. Now when we talk about vertical measurements and horizontal measurements, I'll explain that vertical measurements are measurements that run across the length of the body, like your shoulder to half length, your shoulder to the blouse length. Those things are the vertical measurements. So I'm taking from my shoulder to my half length, which is 16. I would also mark from the shoulder to the blouse length, which is 24 inches. So these are what we call vertical measurements. Then when I move to horizontal measurements are the measurements that run across the circumference of the body. So your bust measurement, which is round your bust, is a horizontal measurement. Your waist circumference, which is the circumference around your waist, is a horizontal measurement. Your hip measurement, which is the circumference around your hip, is a horizontal measurement. So I hope you now understand the difference between vertical measurements and horizontal measurements. So if you understand that, we'll move ahead. So I've marked my half length, my blouse length, and I'll mark 2 inches as seam allowance or hemming allowance. Remember, you're going to hem the bottom of whatever blouse you're making. So this is a basic bodice, right? From your shoulder to the blouse length. Right, so this is not a half scale basic bodice. When you talk about, or when you hear a half scale basic bodice, it simply means a basic bodice that terminates or ends at the half length. So that's why it's called half scale. Then a full scale basic bodice is what I'm drafting here, which starts from the shoulder to the length of your blouse. So these are the terms you need to understand perfectly before you even learn how to make a basic bodice. Now the next vertical line you're going to mark is your chest line, also your armhole line, and it's derived by dividing the bust measurement by 6 plus 1.5 or 2 inches. I like to go with 2 inches because it gives me half inch seam allowance to make ease around the armhole. You know, the armhole, it's not supposed to be tight, so that you can actually raise your hands up, sing praises, say hallelujah, and raise up, wave your hands onto the Lord, and you won't be bothered about hearing crack at your underarm. Right, so that is how to derive your chest line. The chest line is also the armhole line, and it's also the point where you mark your bust measurement. So for me, I have 8 inches. That's the bust. 36 divided by 6, that's 6 plus 2, and that is 8 inches. So I have marked that out. So I've marked out all the vertical measurements. So this is the chest line, this is the half length, okay, which is also the waistline, because that is where you would take your waist circumference or your waist measurement, right? The chest line would be where you would take your bust measurement. I hope you're understanding these things I'm saying. Please, if you don't, I'm in the comment section, and my WhatsApp line is also open for you to send in your questions, right? So on the shoulder line, I'm going to mark the shoulder divided by 2. The shoulder I'm working with is 14 divided by 2, that's 7. So on this shoulder line, I'm going to mark 7 inches. I'll also come to the chest line and mark the same 7 inches, right? So I'll make a connection from the shoulder to the chest line in a straight line, right? So please don't get scared, don't be worried. Gradually we'll get to what we are making. Now the neck depth and neck width of a basic bodice is usually between 3 inches. All right, so I'm making a neck width of 3 inches and a neck depth of 3 inches. I also want you to note that this varies in individuals. So if you're making for somebody that is a plus size, 3 inches is going to be very tight for the person's neckline, neck width and neck depth, right? So you're going to make adjustments to you, either 4 by 4 or whatever preference the person wants. Now on the shoulder line, I'm going to come down by 1 inch and I'll slant that to the neck width. The neck width is the neck wideness, like how wide you want the neck to be, right? So that is what I'll do. I just slant that because the human shoulder is not straight. We have a slanted shoulder. Now, so afterwards, I'm going to measure the distance from that shoulder slant to my chest line and divide that by 2. So you can just use your tape to divide it by 2 and make a mark at that point. Then you need to come in by either ½ inch or 3/4. Right, so I also think I need to make a tutorial on how to read and understand your tape. If you want to know how to do that, please in the comment section indicate, so that I don't make a video that you do not need. So if you want to learn how to read your tape accurately, so that all these measurements will be very, very easy for you, so what I'll do would be to connect from that 3/4 inch that I came in word by, I'll connect it to the shoulder slope, right? So afterwards, we can now start marking all our horizontal measurement. So the bust is 36, we divide that by 4, it gives us 9 inches. So on the chest line, I'll go ahead and mark 9 inches plus 2 inches seam allowance. 2 inches seam allowance is the standard seam allowance that you would add, but you can now decide to add more or do less, right? But 2 inches is standard seam allowance or sewing allowance. So I'm going to use my curve ruler to make a connection from that 3/4 that we came inwards by 2, where I marked my bust measurement, like so. So this becomes your armhole, right? I hope you understand that. Please, you can rewind this video to make sure you understand what I have just done here. Now on the waistline, or on the half length, you're going to divide your waist measurement by 4. So the waist I have is 29 divided by 4, that's 7.25, that's 7 1/4. Please, if you don't know how to indicate or mark out this measurement on your tape, or to read these measurements on your tape, please identify. I'll make the video. So when you mark quarter or your waist divided by 4, you're going to add 2 inches seam allowance and 1 inch that allowance. Please, when you hear quarter of the bust measurement or quarter of the waist measurement, it simply means dividing that measurement by 4, right? You know that half of the measurement is dividing it by 2, then quarter would mean dividing by 4. Okay, so when you have quarter of the bust waist, it just means divide that circumference by 4, or that circumference divided by 4. So on the blouse length, I'm going to mark the hip measurement, which is 36 plus 2 inches. I'll extend the same measurement to the length of the blouse. Right, so I will just connect from the waist to the hip, and I've already connected from the bust to the waist. So I'll be using the curvy part of my ruler, because our hips, God has blessed us in that area. So you're just going to give that a sweet hip curve, right? So that I connect to the length of the blouse. All right, so this is what your basic bodice looks like without any dart. Okay, so we have the waist dart, we have the bust dart. So I'll come to that in a short time. Now, because you don't want the hem of your blouse to be very straight like this, you'd from your seam allowance, or from that seam allowance of 2 inches, just make a slant line just like so. Okay, just make a slant line so that the hem of your blouse is curved and not pointy and straight. So this is a basic bodice without drama, no that, no bust that, no waist that. So I'm going to induce drama right now. Okay, and a drama that is very easy to understand. You need your bust pan for this drama, right? And this drama is just your dart. Okay, just taking your dart. So you need bust span. Bust span is just nipple to nipple measurement, just the distance from one nipple to the other. But if you can't take that measurement, just divide your bust by 10 and it will give you your nipple to nipple measurement. So bust 36 divided by 10, that's 3.6. So I'll be using 3.6 as my bust span or my dart width, right? So on the waistline, on the half length, I'm going to mark 3.6, right? Then because this is a dart, you're going to add half inch to that, so you're going to have your 4.1, right? So I would also mark the same thing on the bust point. Now the bust point is the distance from the shoulder to the top of your nipple. All right, so I've indicated that right here. So this is the bust point. Okay, bust point, the measurement you take from the shoulder to the top of your nipple, right? So you're going to connect this your bust pan line. You connect it from the chest, from the bust point down to the length of the blouse. Now, so remember when we are drafting, we added 1 inch as that allowance. I'm going to share that 1 inch on both sides of this your bust span line. So that's why I have half inch on both sides. Then on the bust point, I'll come down by 1 inch. Then from the blouse length, I'll go up by 2 inches. Please note these things. From the bust point, you come down by 1 inch. From the blouse length, you go up by 2 inches. Okay, so this is for your dart. That's why I said drama. So you just need to take time, watch it over and over again if you're a beginner to understand. I'm trying my possible best to make this as easy as it can be. So I'll just connect my dart like so, connect the half inch on both sides to up, that's the bust point, then connect it downwards to the 2 inches before the blouse length. So this is your basic bodice with just your waist dart, no too much drama. Okay, so if you want to incorporate more drama, you would now bring in your bust dart. Okay, so that's not too much for you to handle because I know that you will get it. Now the bust dart is usually 2 inches wide, and that is because the the front length and the back length is usually not the same. Okay, so take your measurement. Your blouse length in front and back is usually not the same, right? It varies from within 2 inches. So after marking that 2 inches, I'm going to connect it to about half inch before my bust pan. You can see what I've done there, half inch before my bust pan, not exactly the bust pan. Okay, just give a bit of allowance before your bust span, right? So this 2 inches is my bust dart. So I'm going to share it into two. So I've made a mark at the midpoint. So at that midpoint, I'll go up by around 3/4 of an inch. This is to give me seam allowance, because by the time I sew this my bust dart now, I'm going to have a little bit of shortage by the side. So that's why you need to give this allowance. So this is how I'm giving the allowance. Go upwards by 3/4 and connect it back to the sides of your bust dart, so you have a bust dart now. So I'm shading this out so that you know that you can either cut out your bust dart or you sew your bust dart. Okay, so this is also your waist dart. So the shaded areas are the darts. So you have incorporated your waist dart and your bust dart, and the good thing is that you can add this to a basic bodice. Okay, a bust dart and a waist dart, and it's going to give you an amazing dress. It's going to be very simple but still very detailed and beautiful, because the waist dart is going to help give fitting to your dress or your blouse. Then the bust dart is going to help your bust to relax very well, People would even assume you added a breast pad because it's going to crop out your bust so well. So that's the end of the drama. You're going to now cut out. So I hope the drama wasn't too much for you to handle. And if it was, please, I'm right there in the comment section, and my WhatsApp line is on the screen. You can always reach out to me and I'll explain more to you in detail. So I am cutting out like so. So you also need to watch how I am cutting. You can see how gently I am taking this so that you can get what we're doing here. All right, I sincerely want you to know what we're doing. Okay, so because after making these basic body tutorials, in my subsequent tutorials I'll just draft out the basic bodies, okay, and we'll start whatever style we are making from there. That's why I'm coming down to the basics so that every one of us would come along with me. So after making this basic bodies tutorial, I also try to make a basic skirt tutorial, a basic dress tutorial, and a basic trouser tutorial, so that whatever style we now want to achieve, we can use the basic bodies, basic skirt, basic gown, basic trouser to achieve whatever style that we want. So when you want to sew your bust dart, this is how you sew your bust dart. You're going to hold it into like so and stitch it down, right? So I'm going to just flip this around to show you how to sew. Remember, you marked half of your bust dart, so you're just going to fold it from that half, okay, then go and stitch it. So this is what you do. You flip your fabric like so, then go and stitch it down like so. Just stitch it down. So that's how to stitch your bust dart. Okay, it's really easy. When you transfer this pattern to your fabric, you just go and stitch it down. The same thing for your waist dart. You make sure that you transfer your dart to your fabric, okay, so you go and flip it like so, then go and stitch like so, right? So there is something called the tracing wheel. So when you're transferring your pattern to fabric, you can always use the tracing wheel to trace your darts to your fabric, so that you just use your chalk and highlight them, and you know where to sew your darts and all of that. Okay, so this is it for the front, guys. So we'll move over to the back. The back, I'll just get a plain paper, and it's really very easy for the back. I'll just mark 2 inches before taking out my measurements. Okay, so that 2 inches is your zip allowance. Remember, the back has to have a zipper at the back so that you can wear the dress comfortably. So what I'm doing now is to mark 2 inches, and this 2 inches, like I've said, is my zip allowance. Okay, right? So afterwards, the back really does not have too much drama, right? You just basically place the front bodice on top of the back pattern and trace out what you have to achieve your back pattern. But because there is bust dart in front, I do a little bit of alteration at the back so that you don't have zipper bulge at the back. You don't have your zipper area folding or bulging, right? So I'll show you that trick that I do when I'm doing pattern drafting like so. Then when I'm drafting on my fabric, okay, I'll also show you what I do so that I eliminate back puff. Okay, so I'll just place the front pattern on the back pattern, placing it starting from my 2 inches zip allowance. So what I'll do will just be to trace round this pattern. Okay, so now one thing is that the neck depth for the front and the back are usually not the same. You can make them the same, okay, depending on your preference, but I like to do 1 inch as the back neck depth, because some people don't like to have their neck at the back very deep. Some like to also have a very deep neckline. Right, so I'll just connect the neck depth to the neck width. Okay, so neck depth means the deepness or how low you want the neck to be. Neck width is the wideness, how wide you want the neck to be. So after just altering the neckline, what I'll just do will be to use my marker to just trace out everything I have on my pattern. Okay, I just trace out the front pattern on the back like so, but the back wouldn't have a bust dart because there's no bust at the back. So I'll not incorporate this my dart allowance for my bust dart. Okay, I will not put that. So the back is now going to stop at this my original blouse length without the 2 inches seam allowance. Remember that when I made the front, after marking my blouse length, I added 2 inches seam allowance. Now remember I told you that the front length and the back length are usually not the same. It's usually higher or lower by 2 inches, which is why we used 2 inches as our bust dart. So it means they're going to reduce 2 inches from the length of the back. Okay, so I'm going to try and close in my bust dart now so that you would see that at the end of the day the front and the back would match. Remember, on the front I added 2 inches allowance for hemming, right? So at the back I'm going to take out that 2 inches entirely. The back is going to be shorter by 2 inches. Okay, so I'll still now do what I did for the front, go up by 2 inches and slant it back like so, so that the hem of my blouse is not straight and sharp and poking out, right? So I'll have a curved hem. Now I'm going to get back my front pattern and sew my bust dart so that you see that the front and the back would align by the time you are done sewing your dart. So let me say this is how it is. You can see, so by the time I fold in, or like my bust that like acts like I've stitched my bust, that you can see that it comes to the back length. Okay, you can see that the front and the back are now the same length. Okay, you can see that. So that's why when you sew in your bust dart, the front and the back would be the same. So I'll also try now to cut out my bust dart. Okay, so that you can see that the front and the back would align when you do this, right? So I've slashed to that point. I'll then go and cover it. So that's why most times when you see us making patterns, we come in with our paper tips. Okay, so this is what you use the paper tips to do, so that whenever you slash out an area, you can always use your paper tape to hold it down. Please, you need to have these things at your disposal if you want to be making patterns. And most times making patterns are really helpful, because any alterations you can do them on your pattern, any mistakes you can correct them on your pattern. You make sure that your pattern is okay before you transfer to your fabric, right? So but if you cut on your fabric already, there's no way you can make so much of an adjustment. Okay, so I've closed my bust dart, so you can now see that the length of the front and the back aligns. You can even see that the slant line that I made aligns. Okay, even at the upper part, the armhole, the neckline, everything aligns. So by the time you sew in your bust dart for the front, the back and the front would align. Okay, so I hope you understand that. So this is how to draft your basic bodice for the front and back. I love you, and I'll see you in my next tutorial. Bye.